ever have a question about your cunt that you were too embarrassed to pose? Like, if I don't have sex for the next 8 years, will my pussy hole close? Well, buckle up, school's in session. These sex pros have planned a lesson, 'cause cunts aren't just for reproduction. Whether you were born with it or it's under construction, open your ears, 'cause the Clam Jam's got you covered. The Clam Jam.
Hello and welcome to the Clam Jam. I'm Vienna, the consultant, your host as always at this live stream where we talk about things that are vagina related, vagina adjacent, people who are excited about vaginas, people who have vaginas, what have you. We're all inclusive of all the vaginas everywhere and all the topics that impact them. So today, we have a very special guest. We're going to be talking about queer fertility and how you become pregnant through non-traditional means if, for, let's say, you don't have access to sperm or you don't have access to an egg as you would traditionally if you were perhaps with someone who had those parts and you would have those parts. You know what I'm saying. So this is a topic that I really love talking about. It's something that I think should be talked about more. I think it is being talked about more. And it's just like really fascinating to learn about how people become pregnant, become parents, their journey to get there. And just like, I don't know, it's cool. It's great. So I'm so excited to have Dallas Casillas on here as our guest today. Dallas is a good friend of mine. And I'm excited to hear her story and talk more about her podcast where she documents her fertility journey. So welcome, Dallas.
Hello, thank you.
Yes. I do want to tell the people about how we met because I think it's a wonderful story, as we were just saying. So this was like 2015, 2014, something like that?
I think it was 2015.
And we were put together by someone on Facebook for an event they were going to go in LA. We didn't know each other, but the event was to go and do the documentary, part of the documentary filming for At Your Cervix, right? Or was that what it's called?
I believe so, yeah.
With Amy Jo Goddard. And she was filming this part where it was like a cervical self-exam circle with all these people who gathered, who I believe were primarily woman identified, but they had vaginas. And the whole thing was like to do a group, like she would demo how to use a speculum on her vagina and show everyone how to use it. And then we would all do it and be filmed doing so. So Dallas and I both lived in San Diego, did not know each other, but we're like, hey, let's get in a car together. Let's meet first thing in that car and then drive the 2 hours to LA and then look at each other's vaginas. And that's what we did. And thus a great friendship was born.
Yes, and I don't know if you knew that it was going to be filmed before we got there, but I don't think I knew that it was going to be filmed. So I remember like walking in the door and they were like, here are your release forms. And I was like, oh, okay.
I can't remember now, but it was filmed. I don't know whatever happened to that. I don't know if it ever came out, but
yeah, I don't either.
Anyway, yeah, that's how this started. That's how this collaboration started, and we've gone on other adventures since then. But today, Dallas, could you like introduce yourself a little bit more to the people and all the things that you do and are?
Yeah, I am Dallas. I got married in the middle of a pandemic last year. Actually, not even the middle, the very beginning of the pandemic last year. To my wonderful wife. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and we are currently trying to conceive our second. By day, I am a teacher. By night, I do things like put cervixes in my vagina and take pictures of my cervix. So,
which is great.
Yeah.
Great activity I encourage everyone to do.
Yes.
Are you going to be pursuing your master's? Is that another thing that you're doing?
I am working towards a bachelor's of science, actually, in health education and promotion. So it's a little bit different of a career path here, more health education specific, and working for a nonprofit of some sort. Awesome. In my dream world, my dream job would be to create comprehensive and inclusive sexual health education that reaches people who are disabled and people who are queer and, all the non-typical people that you think of or that you don't think of when you're teaching about sex education.
Absolutely. That is a very needed subject. Yeah, we should definitely, maybe we could have some time to talk about that as well. Definitely something that I'm excited about as well. So, and you have a podcast. You've recently launched this. So tell us about Less Straightforward.
Yes, Less Straightforward is a podcast for queer folks who are trying to grow their families. And I started it a few months ago. It's kind of a little bit slow right now because it's been the end of school and just life is busy. But when I first kind of delved into this conception journey, there were not a lot of resources for families that looked like mine. There's a lot of like P and V. Here's how they call it baby dancing instead of like sex.
Who calls it baby?
The trying to conceive world calls it baby dancing.
I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of just like hetero resources, and I couldn't find there are some, there's a couple Facebook groups. There was a podcast that I learned about after I started mine, actually. And I created it because I wanted a resource for people. So I don't consider myself an expert, but I have shared all of my knowledge that I have and all of the research that I've done and my trial and error experiences.
That's great. And do you have like quite a few episodes out so far? I know you've talked about yourself, you've interviewed some experts, you've interviewed other families.
Yeah, I think there are 16 episodes right now. Yeah. And there's one where we go over like, what are all the letters? What does everything mean? And then I've had some people share their experiences as well. Cause my experience is it's my experience and it's very limited, but I've had some people come on and share about embryo donation and IVF and all those things. So
awesome. So let's hear your story. So do you want to like share your story with us and then we'll go from there?
Yeah. So, I mean, gosh, we decided that we wanted to try for a baby kind of when we decided we were going to get married as well. We decided to focus on a wedding first, just for legality purposes, because when you are in a queer relationship, marriage means a lot more than it does like if you're in a straight relationship. So we decided to focus on marriage and kind of put baby making on the back burner. And then the global pandemic hit. And we decided to push off baby making even more. And then when it became kind of clear that COVID wasn't going away, we were just going to have to live our lives through it, we decided to start trying. And there's just like so many different confusing things. And the first thing that I wanted to focus on was the cost, because I don't have access to sperm. There's nobody that produces sperm that lives in my home. So,
which is, you use the term, I've heard this and I'd like your thoughts on it, just to interrupt, social infertility. Have you ever heard that term?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's like a really great way to explain it. It's like, you're not infertile, you're just like socially, it's unavailable.
And it actually is something that if you have good insurance and a good doctor, something that a doctor will use to kind of push along your insurance processes, because it is technically infertility. Yeah. Even though there's nothing wrong with your body, you just have like no access to one or the other. So it's actually, if you have good insurance, I don't have good insurance. I have Kaiser. So, yeah, they'll use it to kind of like open up avenues and stuff.
That's really interesting. I didn't know it was used in that kind of context. I thought it was just like, so your doctor could put that on a form and say, Dallas has social infertility and therefore this should be covered.
It would be infertility, and then for like another like drop down, like a reason, the cause of infertility would be socially. Yeah.
Well, I don't love it, but I like the word.
Yeah. So, yeah. That is a descriptive. Yeah. So yeah, the cost of things was really what I started looking at. And if you just do things at home, there are lots of different sperm banks that you can get sperm from. If you just do things at home and you do like one vial of sperm and like one shot, you're looking at $1,200 a month every time you try. And then that number goes up. Obviously, the more sperm you have, the likelier you are to get pregnant in a month. So the more sperm you buy, the better your chances. But then, of course, like your cost goes up $600, $700, $800 a month. So that's a lot of money to commit to. People take out second mortgages on their house for stuff like this and get medical loans. And that wasn't something I was willing to do. So we looked into other options. And another option is using a known donor. So somebody who you know and donates their sperm to you for free. So that's actually what we started out with. I have a friend from high school whose husband donated for another couple, and they have a wonderful daughter. And he was like, yeah, I'll do it for you guys too. So that's how we started, and it worked out pretty well. He doesn't live in the state, but he was coming to California for work. So it was working out pretty well until he got a new job and he moved to Pennsylvania. So yeah.
That definitely put a damper on things.
It did, yeah. So we tried 3 times, and I got pregnant on the 3rd try back in April, which unfortunately ended in a miscarriage. And that was also when he left and moved all the way across the country. So we've decided to start going with frozen sperm. So this cycle will be our first IUI with a midwife and frozen sperm. So we're kind of on like a whole new journey here.
Yeah, I mean, you've been through a lot. I'm so sorry about your miscarriage.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's hard. Especially, I mean, it's always hard. And I'm sure this was extra hard given all the logistics.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, of course it was unexpected. You know, of course it's a possibility, but it was not something that I expected to happen, even though I know that it happens a lot more than people think it does, but it was unexpected. So it was hard.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for sharing all that. I know that right before this, you had a delivery of sperm arrive.
I did. Yes, actually, it's sitting right next to me here.
Can you show it to us?
I can. It is huge. So let me I mean, the actual sperm's not huge, but like the tank.
Oh my God, that's like so. I love our lives.
Yeah, so this is huge. Massive, super heavy.
Incredible, because you're like, it's sperm. You're getting like this much sperm, right? And then my dog is going, your dog is going. We love dogs. We have dogs, and what do you want from us? One day we'll have a studio with that dog.
Oh, one day. Yeah. So this is actually, it's comical when you take it out because this thing is huge. And then inside that is another tank for nitrogen, which is what keeps it frozen. And then you pull out this like tiny little thing, and it's a straw like this big, and it's super skinny and tiny. And it's ridiculous because like the amount of sperm that you actually get in this thing it's comical for how big it is.
Yeah. But it's like millions of sperm, right? Like,
yes.
This is what's crazy about sperm, which I always like, I don't know, just thinking about it, and semen, you're like, there's a lot of, it looks like a lot, right? Like if you're seeing it come out of the traditional source, you're like, wow, there's so much of it. Where does it come from? And then like, it's really not that much. And then, but like for what it is, there is so many sperm in there, and you need like millions upon millions of sperm in order for those sperm as a whole to actually be viable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These each have 10, they're guaranteed for 10 million sperm in there. Wow. And it's just like, it's nothing. It's so small. Yeah. And you can get, I don't know if the like if it would look any bigger if you get the one with more, maybe a little bit, but you can get more than that too. It just costs way more money.
That's so funny. I don't know, it's just fascinating. So I guess, so you touch on a bunch of points that I'm sure like very relatable to people in all of this, of like being like, well, how do we get the sperm? Who do we want to get the sperm from? Known donors, unknown donors, miscarriage, trying multiple times, like the process. And so I'm curious, could you explain some of the letters to people? So we usually, and I posted about this the other day on Instagram, so usually what you're hearing are the words that people are typically saying are either ICI, which is intracervical insemination, IUI, which is intrauterine insemination, and then IVF, which is in vitro fertilization. And IVF is usually done in a clinic. Like, I don't think you can do it outside of a clinic. But the other two you can do outside of the clinical setting. So could you talk us through those different methods a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So ICI is the turkey baster method. That's what everyone thinks of. And you don't actually use a turkey baster, use a syringe, but ICI is putting the sperm just in the vagina, directly on the cervix if you can, or as close to the cervix as possible. And ICI is regular conception. If you were conceiving in the traditional way through intercourse, that would be technically ICI. If you're purchasing sperm, there are a couple of different kinds of sperm you can get. One is washed, one is unwashed. Washed sperm has all of the seminal fluid removed, and it's just the sperm. And unwashed still has seminal fluid.
Which is why that, like, the one that you receive frozen is like this amount of sperm.
Yes. Teeny, tiny. Yeah. So when you're doing an ICI, the cervix is what kind of filters out all that disgustingness and lets only the sperm through. I mean, to me, disgustingness.
I'm trying, it's like be body positive. And if we don't want them to say like nasty stuff about vaginas, like same thing. But I'm also like, it's not my favorite substance.
It's definitely not mine.
I appreciate it. And like, I sleep with a man most of the time. So it's there. But yeah, I feel you.
Yeah. And yeah, so the turkey baster method is what we did at home. You can do IUI at home if it's under the supervision of a professional, because you are entering the uterus. There's obviously a risk of infection. There's a risk of perforation. There's lots and lots of risks, but you can do it at home if you're under the supervision of a professional or somebody who knows how to do it. So IUI is what we're doing next. And I'm not going to a clinic, like a fertility clinic or anything. I am going to a midwife. So I'm expecting that my experience is going to be just lovely and wonderful, because I think the midwifery standard of care is just better.
100%. Like we've had Nikki, who's a midwife, on earlier in the Clam Jam. So she does IUI often. So we have an episode, I believe it's called Building a Community Midwifery Center. I can't remember the exact name, but it's a few episodes previous. So Nikki talks a little bit about doing IUI. And then I know from like other midwifery friends, like it is something that's relatively easy to do at home. And I've worked with clients as well. Like people have come to me for fertility awareness tracking to figure out, okay, like where am I actually fertile in my cycle? So you can optimize obviously your chances. And especially with IUI, you want to be as precise as possible. Whereas with ICI, you have a little bit more of a window because of the cervical mucus. So like, again, in like a more traditional, you're using sperm straight from the source. That's optimizes the chances of pregnancy, because that's how cervical mucus is designed.
Yeah, exactly. And switching from ICI in my own journey to IUI, we had to take a couple of months because I needed to practice tracking better. Because previously, we were using a known donor who was coming over and giving us his sample in our bathroom. And then I was just like walking in after him and taking it to the bedroom. And I cannot express how awkward it is. Like, it is so, he's a wonderful human. He's a great guy, but like, it's not comfortable to ask somebody to come into your bathroom and masturbate into a cup. Like, there's just no easy way to do it.
I love that you were like, it is so awkward. I thought you were gonna be like, it could be really awkward, but we know I'm so friends. You're like, nope, flat out awkward.
I don't think there's any way to be comfortable with it, honestly.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think there is.
I mean, I've tried it, so I don't know.
Yeah. I know that I have some friends that have used their partner's sibling to, so like the non-gestational partner's sibling to be the donor. So there's some like familial connection. And I was trying to think of like, would that be more awkward? Would that be less awkward? More comfortable with that person in general because they're family, but like they're family. Like
they're family, and then you're like making a baby with them, which is yeah.
So it's just so awkward. But
there's like, I remember, I don't know if you've heard of this either. So for there is this system called Nappa technology. So it's based on the Creighton fertility awareness model. It's a Catholic model. It's a natural family planning model. But Nappa technology is really focused on enhancing and preserving fertility in a way that like your mainstream doctor isn't always. So like they're really interested in getting to the root cause of what might be causing some kind of infertility issue and like addressing that and then getting people pregnant, as opposed to, I mean, they use all the drugs. I'm not super familiar with the method in all the ways, but they're trying to like promote the health and holistic well-being of the gestational parent and then, getting them pregnant that way. Because it's Catholic, I don't think they do anything with queer families. I think it's still very much a heterosexual thing. Which is there's lots of like flags for me around that, but I respect a lot of parts of it of just like how they're approaching it, but like, the inclusivity needs some work. But what they do when because it's, again, it's Catholic. And so you can't, there's these rules around sperm collection. And I only bring this up because it's really interesting. They use a special like collection device condom during intercourse. So you don't have to go masturbate in the bathroom at the fertility clinic. You can go home and have like sex with your wife, and then they collect it during that, which I was like,
quite the workaround.
It is quite the workaround. It's really fascinating, but I can also see why like that would just be a good option to have. Like, where are you the most comfortable? Anyway.
Definitely not in a bathroom in a fertility clinic for sure. I do know just a little bit about Nappa doctors, but only because I've been like in this world for so long, and I don't know that they use a lot of medication. Actually, I think it's mostly like they use some medication to like maybe like for insulin resistance and stuff like that. But I know that I almost said legally, but like in their it's not illegal in their religion. IVF is not permitted. So they have to do all the things that they can to before IVF, because it's, like life begins at conception type things.
Yeah, which is that's a whole other topic of like that aspect of assisted reproduction. It's like there are some ethical questions that come up, and depending on your belief system, like that can raise some really serious questions for you, or like inabilities to do other things. But yeah, I think I don't know. I'm still like assessing Nappa, and I think there's lots of good things about it, but also like lots of things that I don't fully agree with.
No, you're right. And the major problem with it, at least for me, is that it's rooted in religion. And so there's just bound to be some inequities and inconsistencies with the things that they say versus the things that they do. So yeah. But that is quite the workaround to no masturbation for sure.
Anyway, all of that. But yeah, so awkward collecting the sperm, but you did it. You like had
mm-hmm. And we came up with some like, my wife actually came up with some really clever things to do, because there was a period of time where like they were home, my wife and our donor were home, and they had to leave, and I was going to be back in like within like 25 minutes. But you have to keep it at a certain temperature, otherwise it dies. So we figured out how to like heat some water up and put it in a thermos, and then like we're like checking the water temperature to make sure that it was good, and then like put the sample in the water temperature. And I mean, that was the cycle I got pregnant. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, ingenuity.
Yes. What is that? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Here you go. Exactly. Totally. Like you just make a little thermos. I don't know. I feel like there's a market for that. Absolutely.
There probably is.
So now you're moving to IUI. And so the ICI, trying the IUI, do you have new plans around IUI? Like, are there other ways you're preparing for this? What does it look like, the conversation like with your midwife or the coordination with the midwife?
So I have just had to track a lot more and nail down my ovulation timing perfectly, because before, when we were using the fresh sample, we had a much larger window. So I was like, I know that like I have some fertile signs here. I'm also testing with LH. So my LH is starting to rise. I haven't quite hit a peak, but I know that I'm close. And I've got like a 5-day window with a fresh sample versus like now with this frozen sample IUI, I have about 12 hours. So mostly I've just had to I thought I was a pro at tracking, and then I had to nail it down to 12 hours. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So we had to take a couple of months because I was like, I need to figure this out. So mostly I've just been tracking a lot, and it has been really interesting because I have learned that like everybody is different, every body is different, and my body signs are different from like by the textbook. I have all of like the typical like cervical mucus and cervical positioning and like all those things, but they don't necessarily happen within the timeline that they're supposed to happen. So I've had to pay attention, like really close attention to everything, and kind of nail down that moment of ovulation. So that has been it's hard. It's focusing a lot of energy on it, and it's difficult, but I feel like pretty good about it. So I did also introduce some new herbal things a few months ago. I'm sure you've talked about how it takes like a few months for your eggs to mature. So like everything that you do now has an effect in a few months. So I started all my herbs a while ago. I started taking ashwagandha, which is like also, sorry, I somehow made my Siri go off on my computer. Which is also, so ashwagandha, which is like a cellular health benefit, and eggs are cells. So boosting that, but it's also been really great for my sleep and for my anxiety, which sleep and anxiety have an effect on your total body health as well.
A huge effect on your fertility. I mean, honestly, like if you can just focus on reducing stress and improving your sleep, that does like a crazy amount of good. That's like, I don't think you notice until you actually try it. And also it's like much easier said than done.
Yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And the other thing that I was kind of wavering on adding in or not, because it can increase your chance of ovulating twice, which obviously increases your chance of getting pregnant with multiples, which was like kind of a but it came recommended from my midwife, and that is Vitex, which is chasteberry also. So those are the two main differences that I added a few months ago, and have started to notice just like my the levels of my hormones, like LH is significantly stronger than it was before. I have higher progesterone levels after I ovulate, which is an indication that I'm having better quality ovulation as well. So obviously I don't recommend starting anything unless you're knowledgeable or you have a care provider and there's medication interactions and all that kind of stuff, but that's just what's worked for me. So those are the main things, like tracking like crazy and adding those couple of supplements. And of course, like just taking care of myself in general, it was really easy to let go of after I had my miscarriage, because I was just sad. So like eating crappy food and like drinking, which I hadn't been doing a lot of. And, so just in general, just taking care of myself. And it sounds silly to say like eat good food and get some exercise, but I'm eating good food and getting exercise, it's just kind of working on total body wellness versus just like overloading my ovaries and uterus with stuff.
Yeah. Which is like I would say is always the preference if you can do it, right? Because if you're not, in my mind, right, and the way I'm trained, like it's a holistic model. So your whole body is going to be involved in getting pregnant and obviously carrying that pregnancy. So the healthier you are going in, the more likely you have chances of having a healthy pregnancy. Doesn't mean that there might not be complications, but like set yourself up for success as much as possible. And I mean, there's different ways, right? There's different ways that people get pregnant using assisted reproduction. And so if you're doing IUI in the clinic, or if you're doing IVF especially, they're going to like use medications to force your body to do some things that it wouldn't do. And that makes sense in those cases. But I would also say if you can do things that just like support ovulation happening versus like punching it through like a bunch of chemicals to stimulate a bunch of things happening at once or overstimulate, that's definitely a better route in my mind.
Yes, absolutely. Mine too. And of course, like clinically and medically is what works for some people, but I would love to do whatever I can before then. And it feels like we've been trying for a very long time because it's been a lot of calendar months, but we've really only had 4 attempts and the third one was successful. So even though I did not stay pregnant, I'm kind of trying to think of like the mindset that like, okay, my body does know how to do this. Obviously I have a child already, but it's been 8 years. So that's not an indication of anything anymore. So, I know that my body is doing the right things. I know that my body has the ability to get pregnant. So I'm just focusing on that and I'm supporting it in all the ways that I can. So I decided that like for my own mental health, once we got to 6 tries on our own with no medication or anything, I was going to reassess and think about the potential of possibly moving to a clinic just because I don't know that there's any issues with my body or any issues with like the sperm that we're using or anything, but timing is really difficult. And it's really hard when you only have like 1 shot. So for the timing aspect, moving to medicated is way beneficial because you control every aspect of it. Right. So, but for myself, that's where I'm at now.
And that makes sense. And I think that's such an important question to know of just like, where's your limit or where do you need to like, where's your boundaries? Where do you reassess? I think what I hear you keep saying is that like, it takes so much time. And that I think is something that people rarely think about when they're getting pregnant, no matter how they're getting pregnant, like even in straight couples, it's like, we're just going to like stop using, we're going to throw out the pill and we're going to stop using condoms and bam, baby. And that's usually not how it works. It can take several tries, like even using nothing, like your chances of conceiving in a regular cycle, it's like 25%.
It's pretty low.
And yeah, it's pretty low. So the more you try, like the more your chances increase. But then also like, as you said, like miscarriage is a very common outcome of pregnancy, which is just biologically, that's what happens. And I don't know if that's always talked about. Like the ability to get pregnant, right? I think like sometimes when people talk about like achieving a pregnancy, like that's one piece. And then like the carrying the pregnancy to term is another piece. But yeah, this whole idea of like, it takes so much time and keeping that in mind when you are setting out to become pregnant. Maybe it'll happen super fast. There's definitely people and all kinds, like there's people who are trying with like IUI or ICI or doing it at home and it happens on the first time. People doing IVF, it happens on the first time. People doing it, traditional with a penis at home, it happens on the first try, but it's not common. It's not the common story. I think it's a narrative people have, but it's not common.
And I think it's a narrative that people have because talking about miscarriage it makes people uncomfortable, and talking about infertility makes people uncomfortable. So the people who do talk about it are the people who have those successful pregnancies and who have those successful like 1 month, 2 months, and we got pregnant. We got pregnant on the first try. We were so lucky. It's incredible. Those are the people that talk about it. And the people who don't, and are people who struggle or people who have recurring losses or the things that make people uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it brings up all kinds of things, right? And I think it brings all kinds of things, all of our feelings. Like I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about this, but I know especially in more like heterosexual contexts, or just like there is something about being a woman or identifying as a woman that there is a feeling that it should be easy and natural for us to get pregnant because our bodies are designed to do it, right? And even if you don't feel like you believe that, I've heard from other people that it becomes like the fact that you can't get pregnant when you want to after being told your whole life, like you can get pregnant at any moment. Better take all the birth control you can if you're sleeping with men or people with sperm. And
or getting in a hot tub with somebody who has a penis.
Yeah, and you just like or sit on a toilet seat, like it can just happen.
Yeah,
which is not true. That's not. But
not true.
But then this other aspect of being like, is there something deeply flawed in me? Am I a bad woman if I cannot get pregnant? And I don't think people expect that to come up as a fear or a trigger. And I think it comes up for a lot of us without us having any idea that that's what's at the root of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. And I think there's a lot of things like that just relate to being a woman or identifying as a woman in general. Like you should be able to do these things. You should be able to be a mom. You should be able to breastfeed. You should be able to do all of these things with your female body that you are supposed to do. And if there's any sort of variation in that at all, it becomes some deep shame. Some like, and I think you're right that it just kind of comes out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere. But in reality, it's what the narrative that we hear for our entire lives.
Truly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder in like your conversations with other queer families, talking about like how their pregnancy journeys went, have you like gleaned advice from them or learned things from other people? Like where have you, how has your perspective shifted talking to other families going through similar things? And are there like pieces of knowledge or wisdom that you've gleaned that you're so glad you have now that maybe you wish you had earlier?
Well, for one, I feel very lucky to live in California. We are very liberal with a lot of our family laws, and it's not like that in other states. There's still a lot of things here that like, in order for my wife to be recognized as my child's parent, she has to adopt the child, even though we're already married. So in California, a marriage will signify like parentage. But if we were to travel anywhere outside of California without an adoption decree, she would not be recognized as a parent. So in California, we're very lucky that we get to do that. So that's been like my big thing is like, thank God I live where I do. Thank God I don't live in the South. Thank God I, like somewhere else. That has been a huge relief for me. And I mean, one of the things that I was seeking before I created the podcast was peer support and peer knowledge, because reading a textbook is just not the best way to learn what's right for my body and what's going to work. And reading what's in a textbook is not always what is going to work. Sometimes what's in the textbook will be more harmful than good. And so one of the big things that I've learned from interviewing other families is just like how to actually do this. And because it's confusing. It's like not easy. It's not easy to get pregnant when you don't have access to sperm being produced in your home. And learning how to track, particularly when it came to me switching from ICI to IUI, because going from fresh sperm to frozen sperm, the tracking is so different. I really felt like I was starting all over and I had no clue what I was doing. So learning from other people and learning like, hey, this is what happened to me, and hey, this is what worked for me, and this is what didn't, has been one of the best things about the podcast for sure.
That's great. Yeah, I think I think what you're saying is, or what I hear you saying is like having a community to go to answer your questions, which is what we have as human beings have, right? And it's just not been done for a variety of reasons this way historically. And you just want that same support that anyone else would have trying to get pregnant.
Yeah. It's like a very niche market, like looking for somebody who has, the same, not that there's like not very many, there's tons of queer people, but queer resources for family planning are just minimal.
Yeah.
So yeah, community is, and that's the whole reason I did it anyway, was to start a community because I was lost and I didn't want anyone else to feel that way.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're helping a lot of people with it. And I'm sure you're not alone.
No, definitely not. And there's been a lot of people and a lot of feedback, more than I expected. It was kind of surprising, the amount of feedback and the amount of people that I was like hearing from that were just thanking me. And I was like, wow. I didn't do anything. Please don't thank me for anything. Yes.
You put this out in the world.
I just didn't feel like I needed like recognition or anything. I just wanted to, and I didn't even know if people were listening. Obviously like there's statistics on my podcast but I don't know if people are actually listening and I don't know what people are actually thinking. And I was just kind of like, here's this information that I wish I would have had.
Yeah. But good. I mean, clearly, again, people want it. You needed it. You're creating the resource that you wanted to have.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So thinking about the exact timing for IUI, just like kind of taking us on a slight tangent, but have you ever heard of like getting access to ultrasound? Is that like something that your midwife uses to help determine ovulation outside of like using drugs?
I did not ask if she was using ultrasound at all. I know that you can. I don't know money wise, like, because she's obviously we're paying out of pocket for the midwife. So I would think that just financially for us, it wouldn't be feasible, but I'm sure she has somebody that she contracts out to for ultrasounds because she's a midwife. So it's not something I asked about.
Yeah. I don't know. I just remember hearing about that as like an additional, because like if we use an ultrasound, the reason would be like you can see precisely when you're ovulating, or more like the most precisely that way without having to use drugs. But yeah, you're going to probably have to go through a clinic for that. It's going to be a whole other thing.
And from what I've heard, I think I would have to ask the midwife if we were not using medication, because from what I learned, if you're using medication at all, they monitor with ultrasound, obviously. But if you're going through a clinic, even if you don't have any fertility problems, they want to medicate you anyway, because then they can control the timing and then they can do it Monday through Friday. And versus like my midwife, who is technically on call for me to be like, hey, I'm ovulating, and she's willing to like push her patients so that I can get in for an IUI in her clinic.
Yeah. Versus
like a doctor's office where they want to see you Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And they're going to do whatever they can to make that happen.
Truly. Yeah. So I think there's lots of, as with all these options, right, of like out of clinic, or it sounds like you're going into the midwife's clinic, but I know there are midwives who do house calls as well. So you could like do IUI, you can do it from the comfort of your own home. And, it's something I've heard people talking about specifically with IVF, but just it becomes so clinical, which sometimes it has to be. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, or it's not like clinical is worse than natural or one is better. But I have heard people talk about that the process becomes so sterilized and clinical that it doesn't feel like how you thought getting pregnant would feel, or have that same like, I don't know, homey feeling. And what I really like about these other options for anyone is being able to do it in the comfort of your own home if you can, right? I think that's an important piece just to like flag. It's like, if you can do it at home, like that can be really empowering, that can feel nicer, especially if you have like medical trauma. And especially if you've had like negative experiences as a queer person, which I know many have. That is definitely a great option. And just again, like midwives.
Absolutely. Midwives. I actually have a whole podcast episode of midwives and why you should choose a midwife over a doctor if you have the ability to, for your just your care. Just they can do they can do your pap smear and it's going to be amazing. So, yes. So I will say that, getting pregnant in this way is kind of clinical already. And the first time we did it, it was definitely something that we tried to be like more I want to say romantic, but you can't really, at least in my relationship, we couldn't really make sperm romantic in any way. So in other relationships, you might be able to, but in my personal relationship, sperm was not romantic. And we did try to, make it like moody, like lights low and like comfortable and like intimate. And then other times it has been like, okay, we need to do this by 11:30 in the morning, or we can't do it. And, our kid is downstairs and she doesn't know what we're doing. And so we need to do it quickly. And it's like the middle of the day and the sun is high and it's like, okay, do it quickly, so just in general, it's kind of hard for it to be comfortable, but it is something that we've tried to make sure that we're making a point to like have a little bit of a ritual, set intentions, and it doesn't have to be romantic because it's not a romantic thing for us, but we are trying to set intentions and trying to consciously make an effort to create life versus just like stick it in and, and that was not meant to say like stick it in and go for it. That was meant to say like stick the syringe in. Right. And at the midwife, I am going into her clinic, but I had a phone call with her just the other day actually. And I was like, I've never done this before. I don't know what we're going to do. And she was like, well, I'm going to give you the speculum and you can insert the speculum and take it as long as you need, because obviously we can't use lube because of the implications of lube harming the sperm. She's like, I want that to be comfortable for you. You can bring some music, bring some candles, bring some blankets. Like, let's do whatever we can to make this as comfortable for you as possible. And in my head, I was kind of thinking of a more clinical thing. And the last time I had an experience in a clinic was with something being inserted into my uterus was when I got an IUD 8 years ago. And getting the IUD was so painful. And I ended up like passing out and throwing up on the floor. And so in my head, all I could think of was like, I'm going to have this same response to like a trauma to my cervix. I'm going to be in this clinic and it's going to be awkward and it's going to be, but I am feeling a lot better about it after having that conversation with the midwife. And I do plan to bring like my stuff to make me feel comfortable, because it's not a comfortable thing, like spreading your legs for a stranger who I've never actually met her either, because it's been COVID. So all of our interactions have been over Zoom.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that sounds like intense, a lot of feelings. I'm glad you're getting to feel better about it, and I hope it goes very smoothly for you.
Yeah, I do feel a lot better about it. And just the fact that like you could not go into a clinic and put your own speculum in and go as slow as you need and like be as comfortable as you need to be. They're just going to like put it in and it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And it's going to be uncomfortable. So
again,
I am excited that it's exactly. I am very excited to have like the calm and atmosphere and like comfortable and as much like home as it can be for something so clinical. Yeah.
Does your wife get to go with you?
Hopefully, depending on when my peak LH hits. So I obviously am tracking the one that they want me to track the most is LH, which is luteinizing hormone, which is the hormone that triggers ovulation. And once you hit a peak, you usually ovulate within like 24 hours. I typically ovulate about 30 hours after my peak LH. So I have to get in there within like just about 24 hours. So depending on whenever I get that positive, 24 hours later, I will need to be inseminated. So it really just depends of like when it happens. Hopefully she'll get to go. I'm really hoping it happens on Tuesday, because that would be great because she'd be off. So, yeah.
Oh. Thank you for sharing all that. As we start to wrap up, what I'd like to know is, do you have two things. One, besides your own fertility journey, has there been hearing someone's story that has really made you, given you hope, or made you feel hope, or empowered, or it changed your mind about something, or it really shifted something for you?
Yes, actually, I have a friend who, actually I have a couple friends who use the same sperm clinic, sperm donation. What is it called? Sperm bank. There we go.
Yeah.
Sperm bank that we do. And I've heard mixed things about them. And one person was like, this is very clinical. This is how we have to do it. This is the only way to get pregnant. And then another person got pregnant with a midwife at home. And hearing her story and her help, she was the first person that said hey, your ovulation doesn't seem to be lining up with your body signs. So you should pay attention to what your temperature is doing and what your progesterone is doing. And I found out that she was the first person to point that out to me, and I probably wouldn't have figured it out without her help. So that has been really helpful. But also, she was the person that was like, you don't need to go to a clinic. You're going to get pregnant. Your body can do this. You're awesome. Here's how I did it. So hearing her story has been really impactful on my own, especially after I had my miscarriage, because I was very discouraged by that and thinking in addition to having a miscarriage, our donor sperm also was now across the country. So it felt very disheartening. And I was just I'm never going to be able to do this. I have to go to a clinic. I have to spend all this money. I have to do all these hormonal things to my body, and I'm never going to get pregnant. And she was like, hold on, take a breath. You can get pregnant. I did it. Here's how. So that has been incredibly beneficial.
That's great. Yeah. It's good to it's always great when someone's story makes you be okay. If it's possible for them, it's possible for me.
Yeah.
So with that, do you have any advice at this point that you'd like to share with anyone else who's in a queer relationship, or they're achieving pregnancy outside of the traditional means? Do you have advice, any advice that you would share as people get started on this journey?
Finding community is definitely the biggest thing that I have. And actually, when I ask that question to every single person that I interview on my podcast, it's pretty much the same thing that they say as well. Find your community, find your people. It may not necessarily be other queer people, but perhaps the sperm bank that you're using, they usually have Facebook groups and stuff like that. And those people may not be in queer relationships, but they're also using donor sperm to get pregnant. So that can be very helpful as well. But finding community and really learning your options and knowing what is in front of you before you get started, especially when it comes to choosing a known donor versus choosing donor sperm from a bank, because the legalities that are involved are quite hefty, and you can be setting yourself up for success very easily or failure very easily, depending on which route you choose. So definitely legal things, especially if you're not in the state of California, where California protects known donors and donor agreements like that, versus all the other states which don't. So
yeah, it's good
community
advice.
And absolutely knowing your options.
Yeah, I think so. Excellent advice. Very practical. I like it. Well, Dallas, thank you so much for being here. It was so great to see your face and hear more about what's going on with you. Everyone check out the Less Straightforward podcast. Do you have a place where people can find you? Do you want to list how they can access all the things you have to offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So Less Straightforward is on Instagram at less_straightforward and is available wherever podcasts are. My personal Instagram is maybe Vienna, maybe you can write it down because it's a lot of underscores and letters, but it's at Delizzle. And I'm reachable on my personal Instagram or my Less Straightforward Instagram as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Best of luck. We'll have to have you back on in a little while when, you're at a different phase. Perhaps there's a baby, new things. I don't know. Let's find out. But thank you again. Thank you everyone for watching the live stream or joining in later. As always, you can reach out to me directly with any questions. The Clam Jam is live twice a month. And if you want to get on the live stream, become a Cunts United tier patron of the Consultant, and you too can be on here and ask us questions. Thank you so much. I'm going to play the outro and talk to you all later.
Your cunt is special, there's so much to love. You and your pussy should fit like hand in glove. Whether it belongs to you or your lover, there is so much to discover. See you next time, the Clam Jam's got you covered. The Clam Jam.